I used to believe betrayal arrived with noise, with screaming matches and shattered plates, with moments so obvious that no one could deny them. But the truth entered my life quietly, almost politely, on an ordinary evening when I came home earlier than planned and found my husband sitting at the kitchen table, leaning forward, smiling at his phone with a softness I hadn't seen directed at me in years. And in that instant, my body reacted before my mind could catch up, because something deep inside me understood that this smile was not meant for our life together. And when he noticed me standing there and quickly turned the screen dark, greeting me with a casual tone that felt rehearsed, I realized how long it had been since I truly felt seen by the man I married. That night stayed with me like a quiet echo, because once doubt enters your heart, it starts rewriting memories, and suddenly moments that once seemed harmless begin to feel heavy with meaning, like all the late nights he claimed were work emergencies, the way his attention drifted when I spoke, or how our conversations slowly turned into updates rather than connections. And as we sat across from each other during dinner, exchanging polite words and empty smiles, I felt the growing distance between us stretch into something physical, something I could almost touch. And I wondered how two people could live side by side for years and still become strangers without ever acknowledging the moment it happened. Sleep abandoned me that night, and sometime after midnight, I woke to the cold space beside me, listening to the quiet hum of the house until I noticed a faint glow coming from the living room. And when I stepped into the hallway, I heard his voice, low and gentle, speaking with a tenderness that made my chest tighten, because it wasn't the voice of a man discussing work or routine obligations. It was the voice of someone emotionally present, invested, and careful. And standing there in the darkness, unseen and unheard, I realized I was witnessing intimacy that no longer belonged to me, and that realization cut deeper than any confession ever could. I didn't confront him the next morning, not because I lacked courage, but because I needed certainty, because suspicion without proof becomes its own kind of torment. And over the following days, I watched him closely, noticing things I had once dismissed as stress or habit, like how his phone never left his side, how he smiled at messages and frowned when interrupted, how he became distant when I tried to reach for him emotionally. And with every observation, the truth felt closer, heavier, settling into my chest like a truth waiting to be spoken aloud. The moment everything collapsed came quietly, without drama. On a rainy afternoon when I opened his laptop to check an email, and a message appeared before I could look away, her name glowing on the screen as if it had been waiting for me. And as I read words filled with affection, longing, and promises about a future that did not include me, I felt the kind of pain that doesn't scream, but numbs. Because betrayal isn't just about another person. It's about realizing that while you were protecting a shared life, someone else was quietly rewriting it without your consent. I closed the laptop slowly, as if any sudden movement might shatter what little balance I had left. And for a long time, I simply sat there, listening to the rain against the windows, trying to understand how love could quietly rot without anyone noticing until the collapse was unavoidable. Because betrayal isn't born overnight. It grows patiently in the spaces where honesty once lived. And as I replayed every message in my head, I realized he hadn't just fallen for someone else. He had built an entire emotional world where I no longer existed. When he came home that evening, shaking the rain from his coat and asking about my day with practiced ease, I looked at him and felt something unfamiliar settle inside me. Not anger, not sadness, but clarity. Because once the truth reveals itself, it changes the way you see everything. And as he talked about work and schedules and plans for the weekend, I wondered how many times he had rehearsed these conversations while keeping a different life hidden just beneath the surface. That night, lying beside him in the dark, I realized how lonely betrayal truly is, because the person you want to run from is the same person you once trusted with your deepest fears. And while his breathing grew steady with sleep, mine stayed shallow and uncertain, filled with questions I wasn't ready to ask and answers I already feared. And in that silence, I understood that the hardest part wasn't discovering the affair, but accepting that the man beside me was no longer the one I married. Days passed, and with each one, I felt myself slipping further away emotionally, responding with politeness instead of warmth, listening instead of sharing, because part of me needed space to grieve the life I thought I had, and part of me was preparing for a conversation that would change everything. And when he finally noticed the distance and asked if something was wrong, the irony nearly broke me. Because something had been wrong for a long time, and only now did he seem afraid of losing me. The confrontation didn't come in anger, but in exhaustion, late one evening when I placed the laptop between us and said her name out loud, watching his face change in ways I had never seen before. And in that moment, all the explanations, apologies, and justifications spilled out, tangled and desperate, but none of them answered the only question that mattered to me, which was how long he had chosen silence over honesty. And as he spoke, I realized he was trying to save himself, not us. He said it hadn't meant to go this far, that it started as conversations, as comfort, as understanding. But betrayal always follows the same path, beginning where emotional needs are unmet and ending where boundaries are ignored. And listening to him describe their connection, I felt an unexpected calm, because once everything was exposed, there was nothing left to imagine. And sometimes the truth, even when painful, is easier to live with than endless doubt. I asked him when he stopped loving me, and the silence that followed told me more than any answer could. Because love doesn't disappear suddenly, it fades when effort disappears, when listening stops, when choosing each other becomes optional. And in that quiet space between us, I mourned not just the marriage, but the version of myself who believed love alone was enough to hold everything together. Leaving wasn't dramatic. There were no raised voices or slammed doors, just a suitcase packed with the life I was ready to reclaim. And as I stepped outside into the cool night air, I felt both terrified and strangely free. Because walking away from betrayal isn't failure, it's survival. And with every step away from that house, I felt myself slowly returning to someone I recognized, someone who deserved honesty, respect, and a love that didn't require constant doubt. Healing didn't come quickly or easily. It arrived in fragments, through quiet mornings, difficult reflections, and the slow rebuilding of trust in myself. And over time, I learned that betrayal doesn't define the one who was hurt. It reveals the one who caused it. And as weeks turned into months, I began to understand that sometimes relationships don't end because love disappears, but because truth is no longer shared. Looking back now, I no longer ask why it happened, because not every ending requires understanding. Some only require acceptance. And while the scars remain, they remind me of my strength rather than my pain. Because betrayal taught me the value of self-respect, of boundaries, and of choosing myself when someone else could not. And in that lesson, I found a new beginning that didn't depend on anyone else's promises.